Hey there, this is your pal Pally, and welcome back to Getter Raid. Warlords of Draenor beta testing continues on with some more heroic mode bosses. It's time for the muscle-bound bros, Hans'gar and Franzok, to pump you up. Oh, and this fight shows how valuable your hunter's new raid cooldown is. As always, mechanics can change from the time a fight is beta tested to when it is actually released live. So, welcome to the Siegecrafter-like conveyor belts that the entire raid gets to deal with. Happy day! This pair of bosses hang out down here for the most part on these belts and do their normal mechanics. But once you get their shared health pool down to certain percentages, one of them will leap off and start the belts up. Then you'll have to deal with a couple different environmental threats. We'll get to that soon, but let's go first through their normal mechanics. As I mentioned, the bosses do share a health pool, so while they are together, take advantage of multi-dotting and cleave where appropriate. They also share a couple of abilities too. They both will do body slams, which is basically them leaping towards a target and giving them a big physical damage debuff called Shattered Vertebrae. It's a 40% increased damage taken debuff, so watch out. There is no way to avoid the slam, but you can make sure it doesn't get on a lot of people, so stay mostly spread. After they land a body slam, the entire raid will take damage from Aftershock, which is about 25k per second dot that lasts for only a few seconds. This is a major source of raid damage in the encounter. Again, it's short duration, but healers will obviously need to pay attention to it. Next up, Crippling Suplex is something the tank should watch for. This takes a random raid member and slams them against the tank, doing the max health of the raid member in damage to the tank. So if your hunter here has 200k max health raid buffed, it will do that 200k to the tank as physical damage. The damage, of course, can be mitigated by armor and cooldowns, but it's something to watch out for during the raid. Lastly, both bosses will gain a damage buff as the fight progresses, called Pumped Up. As their rage increases from taking damage, they will be able to inflict more damage overall, and have more frequent casts of their abilities. Essentially, it's a softened rage timer, but note that it also makes them jump additional times during body slams, so it becomes even more important to stay spread while that's going out. So those are the abilities both bosses have according to the Dungeon Journal. And it may be wrong, and all of the abilities are shared, but they list these other two under Franzok specifically. They are Disrupting Roar and Skullcracker. Disrupting Roar is just what you think it is. It disrupts your casts, meaning interrupting them. It doesn't happen too often, but of course it would be smart to not be casting during that time. Skullcracker is a hammer thrown towards a nearby enemy that inflicts about half your health, 125k. Again, it's not too frequent, but it does point towards healers making sure no one gets gibbed by it by keeping people above 50% health. So that's all for the normal mechanics while Hans and Franz are hanging out together. Once you reach a certain health percentage, one of them hops off and starts the conveyor belt, and environmental threats begin to come out. There are two things that you will face in these phases. Only one of them will come out per phase. First up are Searing Plates. They look like a big plate of burnt toast or something. They will come out sometimes one at a time, sometimes four at a time, and getting hit by them hurts. About 232k per second, so you will get one or two shot by these. Really, this is just about moving as best you can on the belt and avoiding them. When the four at a time ones start coming, there will be a gap to go through, and that gap should be predictable. Like if it's the far left where there is a gap, you can count on the second from the left being the gap next. Just be moving and jumping constantly to help you get places. It's also helpful to try and be near where the plates come out, so you have more time to get to the right gaps and such. The other threat you'll face will be stamping presses. These things will come down from the ceiling and smash into you, doing about 200k damage. Not a one-shot, but almost for regular DPS and healers. They telegraph where they are coming down by lighting up a section of the belt. You have just a few short seconds to move out of the way, so hurry up. As this phase progresses, you'll start to notice the patterns of the presses changing and repeating, so just try to keep yourself near the edges of the sections so you can move one way or the other. Ideally, you can be at the corner of the 4 sections and move in any of those 4 directions to avoid these. But sometimes even that doesn't work out depending on the pattern. Just move your arse! And of course, as I mentioned in the intro, here is where the Hunter cooldown aspect of the Fox becomes huge. I mean, it's an entire long phase of constant movement. I would hope you want to cast while moving, right? Stack the Hunters and have a laugh at this phase. Or at worst, just plan your positioning so that if you need to cast, you aren't going to run into a plate or a press coming down. This phase ends after you again take a percentage of the boss's health off. You'll know when it's over when the belts stop moving. From what I saw during the testing, you would always get a Searing Plate phase first, then back to normal phase, then a Stamping Press phase. We made it past the Stamping Presses once in testing, and that seems to be about the time you should be blowing lust and finishing off the encounter, at least from the standpoint of tuning. There might be a third moving belt phase that was there or would be on live. Just wait until you see what happens in Mythic mode. So that's the sequencing of the fight, so let's touch on a few strategy points. Really, the normal phase is all about just staying spread and watching for the body slams. Healers will have to worry about the aftershocks, and tanks worry about the suplexes. You should keep your cleave and multi-dotting going while you have the chance, and push them into the first moving belt phase. It will be the Searing Plates, and then it's time to start thinking about cooldown usage. The first plates that come out should easily be sidestepped. But once you start getting the 4 at a time with the 1 section gaps, you're going to be running constantly for quite a while. So again, use Aspect of the Fox and any raid cooldown necessary, especially because you could be facing more aftershocks and general raid damage. It would also be good for DPS to save their cooldowns to get out of this phase as quickly as possible. It's health based, so push it here and avoid all that you can. Once you get to the Stamping Presses phase, it's again about moving constantly as the phase progresses, so hopefully you have those raid CDs back up and such. Tanks should note that it's possible to take one of the presses to the face if you are in trouble positioning-wise. Obviously that would put melee in danger too, but you can take it as a tank in terms of how much damage it does. Other non-tank raid members should again take all measures necessary to get away from these. You have a little bit of time as the section lights up white, and as I mentioned earlier, if you can position yourself in between a couple sections, it can become easier, but keep your feet moving throughout all of this. As the pumped up buff seems to be somewhat of an enrage, I would bet that coming out of the Stamping Press phase and popping Lust would be ideal. The bosses will be leaping about and wrecking the tanks, so the quicker you get them down at this point, the better. I really feel for the casters and healers here. This fight is going to be rough on you. And even melee had a hard time staying in range of the bosses during all that movement. So just all reroll Hunter and Shaman and you'll be good to go. No, but seriously, there is a lot of avoidable damage in those phases, so as long as people are careful, you'll come out okay. That's it for this guide on Hans'gar and Franzok Heroic. Tanks should watch for crippling suplexes, and be gentle with moving the bosses during movement phases if possible. Healers, keep an eye out for aftershocks, and watch tanks during the suplex. DPS, keep your feet moving during the moving belt phases, and do your best to avoid splashing the body slams and skullcrackers to others by being mostly spread during normal phases. Thanks for watching, and as always, please comment, like, and or subscribe to the video if you found it helpful, and have a good one!